The sirens wailed through the suburban silence as Karen Morrison stood at her window, phone pressed to her ear, watching the police cars pull up next door. "Yes, officer, I'm certain they're up to something illegal," she hissed into the receiver, her eyes fixed on the construction crew working in Marcus Chen's backyard. But as she turned from the window with a satisfied smirk, her designer heel caught the edge of her marble coffee table. Time seemed to freeze as she stumbled backward through her open patio door, straight toward the empty swimming pool she'd been secretly having drained. For Marcus, Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he surveyed the progress in his backyard. After 3 months of saving every penny from his job at the engineering firm, he'd finally been able to hire a crew to build the outdoor kitchen his wife, Sarah, had dreamed about since they'd moved to Willowbrook Estates 2 years ago. "Looking good, boss," called out Miguel, the lead contractor, as he guided a wheelbarrow of cement toward the foundation they'd poured the day before. "Your wife's gonna love this setup. That pizza oven's gonna be the talk of the neighborhood." Marcus grinned, imagining Sarah's face when she returned from her business trip tomorrow to find her dream taking shape. They'd planned this surprise for months, coordinating schedules and permits, making sure everything would be perfect. The outdoor kitchen would be their first major home improvement, a symbol of their growing roots in this community they'd worked so hard to join. The sharp rap of knuckles against his back gate interrupted his reverie. "Excuse me?" The voice carried the unmistakable edge of authority, mixed with annoyance. "I need to speak with whoever's in charge of this ... construction project." Marcus exchanged a glance with Miguel, who rolled his eyes and continued working. They both knew that voice. Karen Morrison from next door had made her presence known more than once since the Chuns had moved in. Marcus squared his shoulders and walked toward the gate, his work boots crunching on the gravel pathway. Karen Morrison stood on the other side of the fence in a crisp white blouse and pressed khakis, her platinum blonde hair pulled back in a style that probably cost more than Marcus made in a week. At 52, she carried herself with the bearing of someone accustomed to getting her way through a combination of social position and sheer persistence. Her manicured finger tapped impatiently against her phone case as she waited. "Good morning, Mrs. Morrison," Marcus said, unlatching the gate. "What can I do for you?" "You can start by explaining why this racket started at 7 in the morning," she snapped, not bothering with pleasantries. "Some of us have important conference calls with clients in New York. The noise is completely unacceptable." Marcus checked his watch. 8:47 a.m. "Actually, we started at 8:30, which is well within the city's noise ordinance hours." "I made sure to check before we began." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Don't quote regulations to me, young man. I've been living in this neighborhood for 15 years. We have standards here, and I won't have them compromised by..." She gestured vaguely at the construction equipment. "Whatever this is supposed to be." "It's an outdoor kitchen," Marcus replied evenly, though he could feel his jaw tightening. "Sarah and I are building it as a family project. We pulled all the proper permits, and the work should be completed by Friday." "An outdoor kitchen?" Karen's tone suggested he'd announced plans to build a nuclear reactor. "And I suppose you think that's appropriate for a residential neighborhood. Do you have any idea what this will do to property values? The smoke, the noise, the people you'll attract?" The last word hung in the air like a slap. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach as he caught the implication. In the 2 years since he and Sarah had moved to Willowbrook Estates, they'd encountered their share of subtle prejudice, but Karen had always maintained a facade of neighborly politeness. This was the first time she'd let the mask slip so obviously. "The outdoor kitchen is fully compliant with all local codes," Marcus said carefully. "I'm a civil engineer, Mrs. Morrison. I made sure everything was done properly." "Oh, I'm sure you did." Karen's smile was sharp as a blade. "But compliance with codes doesn't address the real issues, does it? This is a quiet, family-oriented neighborhood. We don't need the kind of activity that these outdoor entertainment areas tend to attract." Behind Marcus, the sound of construction continued. But he could sense Miguel and his crew slowing their work, listening to the conversation. Heat crept up the back of his neck as he realized how this must look. Karen Morrison, pillar of the community, dressing down the neighborhood's only Asian family in front of a crew of Latino workers. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the anger building in his chest. "Sarah and I are planning to use the kitchen for family barbecues and maybe hosting some friends from church. Nothing that should disturb anyone." Friends from church? And laugh was brittle, I'm sure. Look, Marcus Can. I call you Marcus. I'm going to be direct with you. This neighborhood has a certain ... character, a certain type of family that fits in here. When people start making dramatic changes to their properties, bringing in construction, crews, planning these elaborate outdoor installations. She shrugged. Well, it sends a message about the direction the neighborhood is heading. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd heard variations of this speech before in college, at his first job, even at the bank when they'd applied for their mortgage. The polite, civilized language that never quite said what it meant, but left no doubt about the real message underneath. Mrs. Morrison, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet, I need to make something very clear. My wife and I have every right to improve our property within the bounds of local law. We've been nothing but good neighbors since we moved here. We keep our lawn maintained, we don't have loud parties, we even helped organize the neighborhood cleanup last spring. Oh, I remember the cleanup, Karen said, her eyes glittering. Very ... enthusiastic participation. But that's exactly my point. Sometimes enthusiasm can be overwhelming for a community that values stability and tradition. Miguel had stopped, working entirely now, standing near the foundation with his hands on his hips, watching the exchange with growing concern. The other workers had gone quiet too, sensing the tension that was crackling between Marcus and Karen like electricity. Before a storm. I think we're done here, Marcus said, stepping back toward the gate. The construction will continue as planned within all legal parameters. If you have specific complaints about noise violations or code issues, you're welcome to contact the city. Oh, I intend to. Karen's voice rose as he turned away from her. And don't think for 1 second that I'll let this slide. I have friends on the city council, Marcus. I have connections you can't even imagine. If you think you can just waltz into our neighborhood and change everything to suit your ... preferences, you're in for a very rude awakening. Marcus paused at the gate, his hand on the latch. Every instinct told him to keep walking, to ignore her threats and focus on the work at hand, but something in her tone, the naked malice, the casual cruelty, made him turn back. Is there something specific you'd like to say to me, Mrs. Morrison? He asked quietly. For a moment, Karen seemed to realize she'd gone too far. Her face flushed, and she glanced around as if suddenly aware that the construction crew was watching. But then her chin lifted, and the mask of politeness slipped away entirely. I'm saying this neighborhood was better before people like you started moving in, she hissed. I'm saying some of us remember when Willowbrook Estates meant something, when it stood for the right kind of families, the right kind of values. And I'm saying that if you think you can intimidate me with your construction crews and your permits and your attitude, you're going to learn exactly how wrong you are. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the ambient noise of the suburbs seemed to fade away. No lawnmowers, no traffic, no children playing in distant yards. Marcus felt as if the entire neighborhood was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Ma'am, Miguel? Called out from behind Marcus, his voice carefully respectful, but with an edge of steel underneath. We're just here to do a job. Good, honest work, for good people. Maybe it's time for everyone to cool down a little. Karen's head snapped toward Miguel, as if she'd forgotten the crew was there. Her face went from flushed to pale in an instant, and Marcus could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. She was realizing, perhaps for the first time, that her outburst had witnesses who could repeat every word she'd said. double quotes, she began, then stopped. For just a moment, she looked uncertain, vulnerable even. But the moment passed, quickly replaced by a cold fury that made her previous anger look like mild annoyance. This isn't over, she said, backing toward her own yard. Not by a long shot. You people have no idea who you're dealing with. She turned and stalked away, her heels clicking angrily against the concrete path that led to her house. Marcus watched her go, his heart hammering against his. Marcus arrived home from work the next evening to find 3 official envelopes waiting in his mailbox. His stomach dropped as he recognized the city seal on each one-stop work order, permit violation notice, and code compliance investigation. His hands shook slightly as he tore open the first envelope, Sarah's rental car pulling into the driveway just as he finished reading. Welcome home, honey, he called out, but his voice came out strained and hollow. Sarah Chen stepped out of her car, took one look at his face, and immediately walked over. At 34, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd clawed her way up from junior analyst to senior consultant at one of Chicago's most prestigious firms. But right now, seeing her husband's expression, she looked worried. "And tired? What happened?" she asked, setting down her overnight bag. Marcus handed her the papers without a word. Structural integrity concerns, improper setback measurements, unlicensed, contractor allegations. She looked up at him with disbelief. "Marcus, you triple-checked all of this. Miguel's crew has been licensed for 15 years. Karen Morrison happened," Marcus said grimly. "Yesterday morning she came over and made it very clear that our kind doesn't belong in her neighborhood. By yesterday afternoon, she'd apparently contacted every city office that would listen." Sarah's jaw tightened. She'd grown up in San Francisco's Chinatown, the daughter of immigrants who'd worked 18-hour days to build a better life for their children. She'd fought her way through Stanford on scholarships and sheer determination, and she had zero tolerance for people who try to use their privilege as a weapon. "Show me exactly what she said." As Marcus recounted the confrontation, Sarah's expression shifted from anger to something colder and more calculating. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment, staring at the official papers in her hands. "She made a mistake," Sarah said finally. "What do you mean? She put this in writing?" Sarah held up the complaint forms. "Look at the timeline. All of these were filed within hours of your conversation. And look at the language concerns about the type of activities this construction will enable. Questions about the applicant's understanding of neighborhood standards. Potential impact on community character. She's not even trying to hide her real motivations." Marcus felt a flicker of hope. "So what do? We fight back. But we do it smart." Sarah pulled out her phone. "I'm calling David Reyes. Remember him from our housewarming party, the civil rights attorney. If Karen Morrison wants to use official channels to harass us, she's about to learn that two can play that game." Across the fence, Karen Morrison stood in her pristine kitchen, scrolling through the responses to her carefully crafted neighborhood email. The subject line read, "Urgent quality of life, concerns Willowbrook Estates." And she'd sent it to every address on the Homeowners Association list. The responses had been better than she'd hoped. Margaret Whitfield from 2 streets over had replied within minutes. "Completely agree about maintaining our neighborhood standards. Count me in for whatever action you think is necessary." Tom Henderson had been more diplomatic, but equally supportive. "While I don't know the Chen family personally, I share your concerns about dramatic property modifications and their impact on our community." But it was the call she'd just finished that had her practically glowing with satisfaction. Mrs. Morrison, her housekeeper, Alina, appeared in the doorway. "The gentleman from the insurance company is here to see you." Perfect, send him around. To the back patio. A small crack in the foundation had been slowly leaking water, and her contractor had recommended draining it completely for proper repairs. But Karen had seen an opportunity. If she could document the damage properly, claim it was more extensive than it really was, she could collect enough to not only fix the pool but completely renovate her entire backyard, maybe even add that outdoor pavilion she'd been coveting. The insurance adjuster was exactly what she'd hoped for. Young backyard, where her empty pool sat like a concrete crater in the perfectly manicured landscape. "As you can see," she said, gesturing toward the hairline crack she'd been monitoring for months, "the damage is quite extensive. The entire structural integrity of the pool has been compromised." The adjuster made notes on his tablet, taking photos of the crack and the drained pool. "It's been getting progressively worse. My contractor says the whole foundation will need to be rebuilt." What she didn't mention was that she'd been documenting the crack for 6 months, taking photos as it slowly expanded, waiting for the perfect moment to make her claim. The timing was ideal, with all the attention focused on the Chen family's construction project. No one would question her own backyard renovation. "I'll need a full contractor's estimate for the repairs," the adjuster said. "Already arranged." Karen handed him a folder of documents. "As you can see, the costs are ... significant." Meanwhile, 3 houses down, Margaret Whitfield was hosting an impromptu coffee gathering in her living room. 5 women sat in her tastefully decorated space, china cups balanced on their knees, their voices low but intense. "I'm just saying, we need to be careful about how we handle this. If we're not thoughtful about our approach, we could end up looking like the bad guys." The Guides, Margaret's voice rose slightly. Jennifer, this is about protecting our investment in this community. Do you have any idea what happens to property values when neighborhoods start changing? But they seem like a nice family, Jennifer protested weakly. My kids have played with some of the children from the construction crew during lunch breaks. They're just working people. That's exactly the problem, said Ruth Carson, a sharp-faced woman in her 60s who'd moved to Willowbrook Estates specifically for its exclusivity. Today, it's an outdoor kitchen. Tomorrow, it's loud parties. Every weekend next year, they're renting out rooms to whoever will pay cash. Before you know it, this place looks like every other mixed neighborhood in the city. To object, but lacking the courage to stand against the group consensus. Karen's done her research, Margaret continued. The city violations are just the beginning. She's got contacts in the homeowners association. People who can make sure any future modifications go through proper scrutiny. And if the Chen family can't handle the pressure, she shrugged. Well, maybe they'll decide this neighborhood isn't the right fit for them after all. But what if they fight back? Jennifer asked. Ruth laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Fight back with what? They're engineers and consultants, not lawyers. They don't have the connections, the resources, or the experience to take on someone like Karen Morrison. Trust me, this will be over within a month. Back at the Chen house, Sarah was finishing her second phone call of the evening while Marcus sat at their kitchen table. Papers spread out in front of him like a battle plan. I spoke to the supervisor, not whoever Karen managed to get to initially, so the stop work order gets lifted. Tomorrow morning, but Marcus, Sarah sat down across from him. This isn't going to end here. Maybe even a discrimination case. If we can establish a pattern of behavior, but that means we need to be prepared for this to escalate. Marcus looked at his wife, freely looked at her. In the soft light of their kitchen, surrounded by the life they'd built together, she looked fierce and determined. But he could also see the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight of having to fight for something that should have been simple. Are you sure you want to do this? He asked quietly. We could just finish the kitchen, keep our heads down, try to get along. Sarah reached across the table and took his hands in hers. Marcus, what did your parents tell you when kids at school called you names? That I had to stand up for myself. That respect isn't given, it's earned. And what did my parents tell me when professors said I didn't belong in advanced engineering courses, that you belonged anywhere you were qualified to be? Then you know the answer. Sarah squeezed his hands. We're not just fighting for us. We're fighting for every family that comes after us, every person who deserves to live where they choose without having to justify their existence to people like Karen Morrison. At that exact moment, Karen Morrison was standing on her back patio, talking on her phone with Tom Patterson, the president of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. I appreciate your position, Tom, but this goes beyond simple construction complaints, she was saying, pacing back and forth along the edge of her empty pool. We're talking about the fundamental character of our community. Karen, I understand your concerns, but the morning sun was barely visible through the gray clouds when Marcus stepped into his backyard at 7 a.m., coffee mug in hand, ready to meet Miguel and restart the work that had been halted by Karen's complaints. Instead, he found his property swarming with people who definitely weren't there to help build an outdoor kitchen. 3 city inspectors stood near the foundation, measuring and photographing everything. A code enforcement officer was examining the permit posted on the fence. 2 police officers flanked a stern-looking woman in a business suit who was taking notes on a tablet. And in the center of it all, like the conductor of a bureaucratic orchestra, stood Karen Morrison, pointing and gesturing as she spoke to each official. There they are now, Karen announced as Marcus appeared, her voice carrying the satisfied tone of someone who'd just played a winning hand. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, I'd like you to meet Inspector Rodriguez from the City Planning Office. Officer Martinez and Officer Chen, no relation, I assume from the police department, and Ms. Valdez from Code Enforcement. Sarah emerged from the house, still in her robe, her hair disheveled from sleep. She took one look at the scene in their backyard, and her expression shifted from confusion to cold fury. What exactly is going on here? She demanded. Inspector Rodriguez, a middle-aged man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, stepped forward. Mrs. Chen, we've received multiple complaints about your construction project. We're here to conduct a thorough investigation of potential violations. What violations? Marcus asked, moving to stand beside his wife. We went through this yesterday. All our permits are in order. Well, that's what we're here to determine, said Ms. Valdez, a thin woman with sharp features who seemed to be enjoying the power of the moment. We've received reports of unpermitted electrical work, potential structural violations, and concerns about the legal status of your construction crew. Sarah's head snapped toward Karen. Legal status? What are you implying? Karen's smile was razor sharp. I'm not implying anything, dear. I'm simply exercising my rights as a concerned citizen to ensure that all activities in our neighborhood comply with local, state, and federal regulations, including immigration and employment laws. The racist dog whistle was so loud it was practically a bullhorn. Marcus felt his hands clench into fists, but Sarah placed a calming hand on his arm. Officers, Sarah said, her voice deadly calm, I'd like to see the specific complaints that were filed. As taxpayers, we have the right to know what we're being accused of. Officer Martinez, who looked uncomfortable with the whole situation, glanced at his notes. The complaints cite noise violations, unpermitted work, and ... double quotes. He hesitated. Concerns about the documentation status of the workers. I see. Sarah pulled out her phone. And which specific immigration laws are allegedly being violated? Because I'm about to call my attorney, and he's going to want details. Now, Karen interjected, there's no need for lawyers. We're all just trying to maintain the standards that make Willowbrook Estates such a wonderful place to live. Standards. Sarah's voice could have frozen hellfire. Is that what you call racial profiling and harassment? Before Karen could respond, Miguel's truck pulled up to the curb. The contractor climbed out, followed by his three-man crew, all of them taking in the scene with expressions ranging from resignation to anger. Miguel walked straight to Marcus, ignoring the officials completely. Boss, what's the situation? Apparently, there are questions about your crew's documentation. Marcus replied loudly, making sure everyone could hear, which is interesting, since Miguel Contreras has been a licensed contractor in this city for 15 years and employs only documented workers. Miguel reached into his back pocket and pulled out a leather wallet. Without a word, he handed his business license, contractor certification, and employment authorization documents to Inspector Rodriguez. One by one, his crew members did the same. Everything's in order, Inspector Rodriguez said after examining the papers. Mr. Contreras, your documentation is complete and current. Karen's face flushed red. Well, that doesn't address the structural concerns, does it? Or the noise violations? Or the complete disregard for neighborhood aesthetics? Actually, said a new voice from the gate, I think it does. Everyone turned to see David Reyes, Sarah's attorney friend, walking into the backyard with a briefcase and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Behind him came a man in an expensive suit carrying a video camera. Good morning, everyone, David said pleasantly. I'm David Reyes, attorney for the Chen family. And this is my associate, Mr. Kim, who's here to document these proceedings for potential legal action. Karen's smile faltered for the first time. Legal action? For what? Harassment, discrimination, filing false reports, conspiracy to interfere with lawful activities, should I continue? David's voice remained conversational, but there was steel underneath. Oh, and I've also taken the liberty of contacting the local news. They're very interested in stories about organized campaigns to drive minority families out of suburban neighborhoods. This is ridiculous, Karen sputtered. This is about property values and community standards. Nothing more. Is it? David pulled out his own tablet. Because I have copies of the emails you sent to the Homeowners Association. Very interesting reading. Would you like me to share some of the more colorful passages with the officers here? The police officers exchanged glances. Officer Martinez cleared his throat. Ms. Morrison, if there's no actual violation of city codes here, we should probably... There are violations. Karen's voice rose to a near shriek. The setback measurements are wrong. The electrical work wasn't inspected. The concrete foundation doesn't meet specifications. Inspector Rodriguez looked up from his measurements. Actually, ma'am, everything appears to be in compliance. The setbacks are exactly what they should be. All electrical work has been properly inspected and approved, and the concrete was poured to specifications that exceed city requirements. That's impossible. Karen looked around frantically, as if the violations might materialize if she just looked hard enough, I measured it myself. I took photographs. From where? Sarah asked quietly. From my ... From my property line, of course. Which property line? Sarah's voice was getting quieter, more dangerous. Because if you've been trespassing on our property to take measurements and photographs, that's a crime. In itself, Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish, gasping for air. In her zeal to build a case against the Chens, she'd climbed over their fence multiple times, measured their property from inside their yard, and taken detailed photographs of their construction from angles that would have been impossible from her own property. I was protecting the neighborhood, she stammered. By breaking the law, Officer Martinez asked. Ma'am, if you've been entering the Chen property without permission, that's criminal trespass. This is insane. Karen's composure finally cracked completely. I've lived in this neighborhood for 15 years. I know everyone on the city council. I have connections that you people can't even imagine. And you're going to take their side over mine. The racist implications in you people hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Officer Chun, who was indeed of Chinese descent, stepped forward. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to calm down. Your connections don't matter here. What matters is the law, and right now, it looks like you're the one who's violated it. Karen looked around the group of officials, her eyes wild. Every single one of them was looking at her with expressions ranging from professional disapproval to outright disgust. The video camera was recording every word, every gesture. Her carefully constructed facade of respectability was crumbling. In real time. This isn't over, she said, her voice shaking with rage. You think you can just move into our neighborhood and change everything? You think you can intimidate me with your lawyers and your cameras? I'll show you what real power looks like. She turned and stalked toward her house, her heels clicking angrily on the concrete. But in her fury, she missed the step down from the Chen's patio to their lawn. Her ankle twisted, and she stumbled, catching herself on the fence post. Careful, Mrs. Morrison, Sarah called out, her voice dripping with false concern. We wouldn't want you to get hurt? Karen shot her a look of pure hatred before limping toward her own property. As the officials began to pack up their equipment, having found no violations whatsoever, David Reyes moved closer to Marcus and Sarah. This was a coordinated attack, he said quietly. Someone called in multiple complaints simultaneously, timed to create maximum disruption and embarrassment. The question is, how did they know you'd be restarting work today? Marcus thought about Miguel's call the night before. Someone's been watching us, listening to our conversations. Maybe. Or maybe, Sarah said thoughtfully, they've been so focused on us that they've made themselves vulnerable in other ways. She was looking toward Karen's house, where their neighbor was visible through the kitchen window, pacing back and forth, and gesturing wildly as she spoke on the phone. What do you mean? Marcus asked. I mean that people who are obsessed with other people's business sometimes neglect their own. Sarah's eyes were sharp, calculating. David, what would you say? If I told you that our neighbor might be committing insurance fraud, David's